Welcome to Fighting for Light, the podcast dedicated to living a life of integrity, aligning mindset with purpose, and shifting from depletion to contribution. Each episode features thoughtful conversation on mindset, leadership, and self image, helping you grow personally and serve others more effectively. Fighting for Light is about seeking truth, beauty, and goodness in a world that often feels chaotic and dark. Let's fight for light. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Fighting for Light. I recognize that this is a super casual setting, but I don't want to leave you all hanging as you're waiting and desiring to hear from me. So, my husband and I gave a talk recently at a church, and one of the topics of the talk was what is the meaning or the understanding of freedom? And I think so often freedom is misunderstood because freedom is, what we fight for. Our country was founded on the idea of freedom, and we go to war to fight for freedom. And when we think about freedom or the idea of being free, I think that we often think about or desire the idea of just doing whatever I want, right? Finding comfort. And so often we forget to really think about what that truly means. If I always do what I want and I never think about what other people want or even need, then my comfort and my self seeking desires, my desire to be free, becomes selfish. And the definition of that would then be license. We have license to do whatever we want. And I think a lot of people confuse when we say we're fighting for freedom that we're fighting to be able to do whatever the heck we want. And that's not true. We have to take into account what is the common good and what is good for ourselves. And so the idea of freedom being liberty is the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of your rights, which is good for you. And everyone has a right to feel safe and secure and to also be protected within the country that they live in or their home or their family. And so we should never take away the freedom of someone else, but we can fight for the understanding that there are goods and a common good and a justice that require us to have freedom within some boundaries. And so I know this is a difficult topic. I know this topic can be one of dissension or discord, but I think that it's important for us to recognize our own opinion of it because for myself, left to my own devices, I will always choose comfort and I will always choose the easier route. And that doesn't mean that I am not free if I'm asked to do the harder things, but it does mean that I'm still in control of myself. I still have choices to make. But let's use my home, for example. The common good of my home is that it is orderly, that it is safe, it is peaceful, it is clean, that food is provided, that my children feel nurtured. And if I just used my own understanding of freedom and just chose to do whatever I want, whenever I wanted, which I struggle with sometimes, I think we all do, then my children and my husband would not be taken care of. But if I understand that I still am in control of my actions and my choices, and I make choices that are healthy and for the common good, then in my freedom, I still am able to be free to make those choices. The other or the other thing to remember is, I guess, the idea of temptation. Sometimes this could be understood as addiction. So, say someone who's addicted to alcohol, if they were free in the truest sense of the word, they could just choose whenever they wanted to drink and to, partake or go to bars or whatever. But if you really stop and think about it, then you start to realize that maybe they are actually a slave to that and they're not as free as they think they are because they're not free to make their own decisions because they're being bombarded with this temptation that's constantly overwhelming them. And so they do have the ability to choose to not succumb to that addiction. It is very difficult, I think, and I wouldn't say that they necessarily are free. And so to recognize that those burdens create sort of a lack of freedom in us. The talk that we gave included the understanding of different relationships, and we were using it in the context of Christianity. But I think that whether or not you're a Christian, these relationships are something that definitely would resonate with you. The relationships that we talk about in Christianity are between us and God, us and ourselves, us and others, and then us and creation or nature, or the world around us. And as Christians, we believe that God created everything and he created it for relationship, created it so that we could be in a relationship with him, but also that we would have a right understanding of ourselves. I've talked about this a little bit before, but understanding how we are, I guess, created to be or how we exist in ourselves with an order of intellect and will and emotions helps us when we are encountering the world around us or any other relationship. And if our reason and our ability to process things is out of line from our emotions, we are going to react in a very different way than if we can look at a situation and see the reality of it or the truth of it. And an example of this would be if it's disordered, you might feel anxiety. I struggle with anxiety, and I will constantly talk about this because I think that it's important. Anxiety for me is the response of just kind of reacting to the emotions that I'm feeling or feeling inside of my body. And a lot of times those emotions come, especially because I feel like the world is happening so fast and I can't keep up. And so I'm constantly making decisions or feeling overwhelmed based on that. But if I can reorder my intellect and my reason and my ability to process those things, I'm going to make choices that are more in line with my own self-identity and what I hold to be true. And I want to talk maybe in my next podcast about values and belief systems because I think those are really true to our self-identity. Those help us to discover and understand our self-identity. But in this context, if we have a true alignment of our rationality, our reason, and our intellect, and our will is the ability to choose, then we feel fulfilled and whole because we're living within um, our right understanding of ourselves. This also impacts our relationships with others and the world around us. If we have a right understanding of ourselves, then when we encounter somebody else, we are able to have a very coherent relationship and we're able to interact and relate in a way that isn't necessarily out of order. Obviously, it doesn't take a great stretch of the imagination to see that a lot of relationships are broken. We see divorce everywhere, we see war happening, we see the world, we're not honoring people like the poor or those that need medical assistance. And we need to recognize that a lot of the freedom that we have in ourselves, and when I say the common good, it might start at the lowest level of your family, and then it expands into your community and your state and your nation and the world. And it's important that we recognize that we have the ability to make choices that are healthy, to make choices that are in line with what we hold to be our values and our belief systems. I say all this because I am recognizing in myself that I don't always know what the common good is. I don't always know what the choices that should be made. In the political sphere, there are some things that we can just hold to be inherently valuable. And I will talk about life here. So, life to me is the utmost importance. And I do think that for any of us who are fighting for life, I'm the CEO of a pregnancy help center, and I'm very aware that it's not just the life of the baby that we're talking about, it is the life of the mom as well. And so often, when I'm talking to a mom who is in a crisis or she is struggling to really understand, she doesn't feel free. in that moment. If she's in an unintended pregnancy, she does not feel free to make a decision that she wants to make. And it becomes such a topic of discussion because if left to her own devices, she might go ahead and choose something that would be to the detriment of that child within her. It's not just the child that's affected. She also will have an impact on her own life because if she makes a choice for abortion, then she is by default, in many cases, going against what she holds to be valuable, which is life itself. And part of the struggle and the dilemma is if she doesn't think that life is worth living, if she doesn't encounter that as something that's valuable, she will not choose that for her child. And so in this excuse me, in this idea of license versus liberty or the, kind of overarching umbrella of freedom, it's important that we see kind of the bigger picture. And it would be my opinion and my belief system that if I could help that mother to understand that her life has value and dignity and meaning, that she would also recognize that for her child. Whether or not she chooses to parent that child is one thing. She could choose other parents in adoption, but to not give them a chance for that is likely going against something that she holds to be valuable and true. For myself, I think that I am entering a new season where I'm recognizing that the common good is, as a whole, is much closer than what I previously imagined it to be. And what do I mean by that is because we have social media, because we have the internet, because we have the news and newspapers and everyone can travel, what used to be, we would manage just our kind of our household and maybe our neighborhood. Now we have an interaction with a greater population at a much easier level. And our awareness of the common good is now expanded. Oh, many, many years ago, even let's say 30 years ago, around when the internet was created, we would hear about what was happening on the news and in the newspaper, let's say politically. But now it's like someone says something, and in minutes, we know what was said and what everyone's opinion about it is. And I want to challenge that because when we start to think about the common good, or we start to think about what opinion we need to hold on that, I think that it is really, really important for us to know where we stand on things. If we let ourselves just be inundated over and over and over again with all these different ideas, we are going to be influenced against what we hold to be valuable. And that's where anxiety and discord come into play. And so going back to the relationships, the four main relationships, we have a relationship with God, ourselves, others, and creation. I'm not going to get into all of them, but first and foremost, we need to unite ourselves to Christ, to God. And whether or not you are a Christian and you believe in Christ as God or you believe in a different God, I do ask that you don't stop seeking truth, that you don't stop seeking wholeness and truth and right understanding, because the God that I know wants you to seek that. But I think that then it starts to show us our own order and our own being and our own fulfillment. And then we're able to look at others in the world and the world around us in a right way, in a way that is healthy and whole and full. I know this is a little bit of a different conversation and maybe a challenging one. Next week and next podcast, I'm going to dive into belief systems and values and how to work on finding our own, because that's important. For this week's journal prompt, I want you to put down on a piece of paper the four relationships: God, self, others, and creation. And then I want you to journal a little bit about where you feel like you are in those relationships, where you feel like maybe they're broken or they're disordered. And then we can talk a little bit about how to reconcile them. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here for this very casual conversation. I am very happy to be here with you. I'm Danielle Hendricks, and this is Fighting for Light.